Hello, welcome to a environment composition tutorial for Art 120. And we're going to be going through what I'm calling the checklist and looking at some simple composition strategies, examples of things that I have done, more of these simple thumbnails dealing with the value, again, simple shape strategies, things to not do, comparing the landscape with the portrait orientation, the different effect that goes on, different compositional strategies again looking at landscape versus portrait, and then just different views, framing things differently, seeing how they shift. Then some more thumbnails of what I've done, and then we're going to finish it out with doing a little drawing. So I'm going to go over this fairly quickly with a checklist. You can always stop the screen and look at it. I actually want you to do that with all these things. These are important with almost every drawing you do, is to be thinking of the narrative opinion, perspective, compose the whole composition with simple shapes, foreground, midground, background, light source, light and value, darks. Uh, I would just want to give balancing your darks is something I talk about. Those are compositional elements that read very clearly. So if you've got a dark here and then a dark here, there's some sort of balance created with that. Whereas if all the dark is just right here and none on the other side, then it's not uh, as balanced. And then form, dealing with form, like what we started the class with, clearly illustrating that. So I quickly just want to talk about this, the narrative opinion. What is that? That means why are you drawing what you're drawing? You can't just say, I'm doing this assignment because I have to. A way to do it is to go, oh, I am supposed to do an environment and draw it out here. And so what do I find evocative about what I'm looking at? What's interesting about it? And doing a series of thumbnails is a way to find that out. Um, and these are some simple compositional strategies. I actually don't want to start with that. This is by a guy named Edgar Payne, a painter in the early part of the 20th century, who did a book on composing for the composition for the landscape or the outdoor painter, basically, which was fairly famous. Um, but here's some drawings that I did, some thumbnail sketches that I did as part of a workshop. And full disclosure, I was actually working from a photograph that this teacher had put out for us. And but I want you to notice it's very clearly the same image, but look at the different things that are going on. Here I have this swoop going like this, and this diagonal of the cows going this way, and this sort of a counter thing like that. And then here I have that same swoop, makes a very strong shape like that. And then I have this sort of motif echoing down here. So there's kind of a bounce between those two things. This is zooming in a bit more, and now it's just almost all of this swoop with these up here. And then we have these sort of things kind of weighted in that way. So how does this relate to the checklist? Well, which one of these would be more interesting to me? Um, Here's a same class working from photos. This is working from a photo here. This is working from a photo here. And um, notice how each one of these have a very different feeling going on based on how it's composed and what I tend to emphasize. This one has three darks here that are working in a swoosh like that. This more has this kind of thing going on with a strong horizon. Um, and and this one here uh, kind of has aspects of both. It has more of a horizon. It's got a little farmhouse over here, which helps to kind of give it a little more context. we have that swoop going on like this, but there's more of a motion going in this direction like that with it. So each one of those has a very different feeling and emphasis. Uh, this one here, similarly, this one gives you the largest sense of what's going on. It's a cliffside in the ocean. You see perspective going back this way. We see the beach going that this way. We have the horizon line here. We have dark mass here, kind of moving down into here, and then just a little balance with that there. This is more of kind of like a big diagonal here with this like that. Then these jagged shapes, light and dark, are kind of echoed up in the foliage up here like this. This has more of kind of like a pyramid shape or a dome shape. You got this angle here like this. Um, so each one of these things is the same, but doing a different thing, and how they're composed is having a very different effect on what's going on. So notice with all of these that I'm not going into detail, that I'm just saying, what's it about? It's about the big basic shapes, and it's about um, uh, getting to the values contrast and what's going on. And the name of the game is overall composition. And this one right here wound up being an actual painting that I did in that class and that I actually sold as well. So the thumbnailing process is really just how to keep things simple and sane basically. So I'm going to put this checklist over here so that we can keep referring back to that. Let's see where we're going. So let's go back to these. Um, these are not hard and fast composition uh, realities. They're basically just, simple strategies. This has the diagonal. This has the diagonal here, going back in perspective like this. The concept of the tunnel, this and this, obviously. You could also almost think of that as a circular format as well. The silhouette, I also translate this into, well, these happen to be sort of pyramid-like feeling going on with these things like that. And then pattern, what's said here, it's more diffuse. It's hard to get a simple shape out of what's going on. And that has a lot of value. Sometimes that's what you're trying to communicate is a sense of cluttered or crowdedness or density or uh, equal emphasis so that there's not one major theme that's simplifying things. But notice this one over here has more of a diagonal sensibility and then this vertical thing going on that. And that tends to organize the composition, make it easier to deal with. So I think that's important for all of you to be thinking in those terms of making them simpler. Again, the pyramid, this is what a lot of people do, this sort of emphasis. This is also sort of equal emphasis here. The cross, horizon, vertical, at radiating, very similar one-point perspective does this a lot. Uh, Things going towards the horizon line. This is swooshing like this. So that's a kind of um, an element of that. The L or rectangular, I have a photo which is very similar to this, and you'll see it later on. You've actually already seen it. And then these are examples of, well, what that's the pyramid. Here is the L, and then here's radiating. A lot of times if you get things coming in directions like this with the horizon, you get that kind of radial sensibility going on. Here you might have heard of this one in the Steel Yard in Art 125 or 130. I know Ryan Finnerty has talked about it. The idea is you have kind of like an L vertical sense going on, but then there's a little counterbalance there. Notice like the idea of the fulcrum there, massive weight, little the kind of doing that to that like that. The balanced, the idea of these hanging in the balance. I think this is also kind of very uh, pyramidal as well in terms of what's going on with it. Circular, we talked about the tunnel, but you can get that with this sort of thing, a circle of clouds. Sometimes you can get into a spiral modality as well. The S, I find that to be very evocative. The thing about the S, especially when it's on a ground plane, is that there's occlusion. This is closer, and this is in front of this, which is in front of this. So that is a real kind of a way to lead the eye back like that and continue on back like that. Here's the Steelyard, boom, boom, like this. I'm not sure what's going on. Oh, I guess the S. Yes. Also, notice how there's like this yin yang going back. And notice how it's not on a picture plane. It's for, oh, wait, that's not meaning to be the S. This is meaning to be the S right here. Well, you see they mix. This is supposed to be the circle one, but I think they're both kind of doing that. So as you can see, when I'm doing this, I'm deviating from the absolute, that this is the circle. Because what I'm trying to do, or any artist, is you're trying to simplify things in order to rein in complexity, in order to make sense of complexity. It helps to have a simple structure. So if you can think of a simple way to proceed, then it really helps. Now, this is an interesting one. This is things to not do. Now, they're suggested, but they can be traps, and sometimes agree to have your canvas like this, to do equal spacing and symmetry like this. In general, I often have an issue with symmetry. I do symmetry sometimes, but I think it tends to be a cop out to have symmetry like this. Not just a cop out, but it starts to sometimes get dull. It says lines too near edge of picture. Sometimes, yes, if you have something too close, it can be a little irritating. I don't mind doing that all the time, but there you go. Another, trees on a line. If you're doing trees and they're all on the same line, you're kind of losing your depth of field. So to pull some trunks down a little bit further and farther, that gives you back in space feeling when you do that. And then they talk about centered horizon, so that the horizon line, sometimes I'll center it, sometimes it won't. Too much going on, it just gets too busy. Again, too much going on. Sort of here, too much going on. Sometimes I have a problem with that. And then equal masses, like making things the same. So trying to create variation. I think this is interesting to look at. Also up here, too many parallel lines. I never quite heard of that one, but yeah, I don't know. Okay, here is the Sammamish Slough, very next, just behind the megachurch. I walk there a lot. It's very beautiful. You have these poplars along a stream. Here's a picture of one, and here is, let me do a different color. Here is this going back, and then this big swoop. This is a bad color. Swooping this way. That's not working. Excuse me. Boom, boom. This is swooping this way, straight, vertical here. Then we have the horizon line. This is going in perspective there. So that's very different than this. Has a very different feeling to it. It becomes more about this in relationship to this, in relationship to this. Those three shapes, 1, 2, 3, and then by default, the fourth shape, the negative space, which is just as important. Um, so that's what we're talking about when we say compose shapes with the checklist. Um, making sure that you're not just dealing with the tree, but that you're thinking in terms of your entire composition, how you intend on composing it, how those shapes relate, and any big differences. For instance, I might want a little bigger tree here to give a little more balance to what's going on here. And then etc. That kind of. Here, notice another vertical composition here. See how it's sectioned off here to here. Not a lot going on down in here. I take this, it's very different. It's completely different. It's much more dynamic. Notice the S we're getting here. The S is what's informing this composition. The horizon line, always very important. Notice how this shape here, we'll call that shape number 2. The river is shape number 1. This shape here, you could even say that, but 4, 5, and then you're dealing with, these more secondary minor shapes here, and then by default, what's left over in the sky. Those are, kind of how to trying to get it so you don't get lost in detail instantly. Also notice what becomes evocative about is this shape and how it really is this is a continuation. So this becomes like a single shape in a way. These reflective uh, sensibilities. This shape becoming part of that shape. This shape becoming part of that shape. So part of the interesting thing with composition and doing environments is not just thinking in terms of objects, but thinking in terms of light and darks as being important. Darks are just as important as literal objects. And you can see that with this composition, that those reflections have as much presence as the actual objects. And, that is what makes this all pretty interesting. Here's another view. Isn't that just beautiful? This is like, look at this. It's like an arrow. And these are the feathers and the quiver going down like that. Or maybe that's the point of the arrow going down like that. Just beautiful reflections. And then notice how different this is here. Oopsie. Notice how different this composition is. It's the same thing, but it just has a completely different feeling based on how it's cropped. Notice this scene. This is on Vashon Island where I live. And this is about, well, the shore, but it's a lot about the sky and the effect of the sky and the water. Really beautiful. And then you see this, and that is still present, but because there's much more of this dark presence here, taking up almost 50% of what's going on, it balances out in a way. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but it's noticing what's going on. Sometimes I find it difficult when there's a lot of darks in one area, and then I don't have many darks over here. Um, what would I maybe look for? I'd maybe look for a bigger cloud over here with some darkness in it that would start to get more of a dark over here. And that might help to start balance that out. So sometimes I'll do this. Sometimes I'll push things a little bit in order to try to get kind of the emphasis in the way I want it to go. So this is a drawing that I did um, at my house. And this is from my studio looking towards the yurt that we have in the backyard. And this is composing an area that's about, like this. That's about the area that you're seeing here. And then, so I want you to notice things. Like, for one thing, this is my panned out camera view. My eyes were able to see in much closer than this, but not quite as close as what I did here. Notice that the trees are largely covering a lot, and because I'm on a railing, I couldn't move over here further. I had to look at what's going on there. And um, and just kind of make up what I wanted. So I removed some of these cedar boughs that were coming down, so because I wanted to see the entrance going into it. Um, what in terms of my checklist that disappeared? What's interesting to me about this? Well, it's interesting to me that I'm looking through this trees and this thing here, and through this, it's interesting that I'm looking through and seeing this yurt. that it's through there. And I'm also interested in the shadows and light, specifically in how this is, the shadows are being thrown here and they're being seen on here, and they're showing even in terms of the arc of how they're going around the dome. And then how the shadows and darks are in the grass. So those are the things that are sort of guiding my why do I want well, I like the fact that it's a yurt, that it looks like a TP slash flying saucer. It's interesting that I'm looking through this zone. I'm into the light, and then basically I'm trying to get things to work after that fact. I'm dealing with form in the tree. um, I'm trying to get, the sense that there's a dark and light side, that the light is shining in a specific direction, and there's a dark side. I'm trying to get some foreground detail with the cedar boughs here, um, so that it seems like foreground. Um, this is a little bit tricky here, but this is actually a hill coming up like this. So this is coming up on top and then it's going back down like this. And so I could work on trying to really get the idea that this isn't just a cast shadow right there, but that is a cast shadow that's behind a hill. And this hill is coming up. So that needs to be finessed. And then, it's in terms of value, it's at a notational level. There are some darks, etc. But what am I going to do? Am I going to make this dark here, like what it's in the photograph, and not worry about reflected light, and then leave the background light? Am I going to push darks back here to get more coming along with that? So that I have the yurt itself standing more out. That would probably help organize the values a bit more. Maybe I could push the side values a bit more of this so that the dome itself kind of gets a sense of more being the cone itself standing out a bit more. And then maybe I could push my darks over here to help really uh, push the sense of light coming in this area and hitting on here like that. And this is a way of organizing my imagery so it's just not too complex. In some ways, I think that this image is too complex. It's too busy. There's too much going on with it. But I have, worked, but I can work towards trying to simplify it. If I was to simplify this in terms of the value composition, well, I'm not going to do that right now, but that'd be something to work towards. So if I was going to do a composition for this, let's say that I'm going to make this bigger. Now, in terms of the checklist, what do I like about this image? Well, the things that I like about this image is I love the 1-point perspective. I and Wes Anderson and many people are really into 1-point perspective. Look how even the clouds are kind of doing that sensibility. So this would be like a radiating composition, basically. That's what's going on with that. And then what else do I like about it? I like that there's poplars, which remind me of Monet paintings, and it's right next to the river. I also like the morning light in terms of how we have these objects in the poplar trees, and they're throwing these long shadows this way. I'm even getting a sense of another poplar that we don't see moving like that. I'm even getting this sort of diagonal. So not only do we have the radiating diagonals of the 1-point perspective, but we also have this counterpoint of the shadows as well. And so that's what's interesting to me. As well, here's another layer of what's interesting to me about this image is that I am interested in doing, thinking of creating this as an example for our demo. So I'm going to quickly, for our final assignment actually. So I'm going to say horizon line here. That's one of my main compositional decisions. I'm going to frame it just because I want you guys to get in the habit of doing that, making a conscious compositional choice. And then thinking in terms of where that is, how much do I want to show of that? I think I'm going to do something like that. And then this going up like that. And then this coming down even further. And maybe it just completely going off there. Then I have this pathway coming down like this. And then I have a sense of the river over here. And then I have this distant landscape going on back there, kind of seeing what's going on back there with that. It's another thing there. And then this tree line, and maybe I'll push that tree line a little higher there. So I kind of push that. And then we have this very crucial sort of pathway line coming towards us like this. Okay, so what am I thinking about here? So this is an example of, I've done like the first 3 or 4 of the checklist here. I'm going to bring the checklist back. Oh, wait, what are you doing, checklist? There you go. I've done narrative opinion. I know why I want it. I've got some sense of perspective. I've composed the whole things with shapes. I've got layers even in terms of foreground, midground, background, light and value. I can even give that, um, you know, give that some lip service. Where is this? There we go. And say, yes, I want these shadow forms to be coming across like that. And then even cursory value. Shadows are very powerful in terms of making things appear real. Um, and then I'm dealing with light and value. Uh, where's the light source? I've already showed it there, but in these objects here, this line of poplars, I can say, well, this line is dark. And then on this side, we start to see some of the light. We start to see kind of the form that's going on there with that. And then horizon, distant darks. And then big foreground darks. And so anyway, what I was thinking of doing is drawing this landscape and then putting something sort of unpredictable. And I saw this space. I'm like, yes, that'd be a perfect spot for some sort of like industrial 18th century style, I don't know, factory brownstone building um, going on. And then maybe I could even steampunk it slightly and, get some weird sort of pipes coming out of it, going into the ground. And so what I'm looking for, this is kind of alluding to the next assignment, is getting, we're going to be doing architecture and landscape, installing architecture into the landscape, um, and then, working that way. So that is, you know, and this is a whole design process here, etc. But getting this to go back like that, would I have the building go all the way back like that? Maybe I would. Um, Piping's not really working out the way I wanted it to, but anyway, so you get the idea. Um, that uh, anyway, okay. So that these are the reasons for drawing that. So am I at the end here? Where am I? Yes, I am. So yeah, I think I've talked enough. I think you get the general idea. I cannot stand what I just did, so I gotta undo it because I'm OCD. Some of that. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Okay, that I can live with that. So yeah, that's all for now. Your teachers are going to be doing whatever they tell you to do, and have fun drawing. All right.